the diaspora really is the sixth region of Africa. And I think that diaspora power is getting stronger and stronger every generation because, we're educated, and a lot of times the immigrant stock that we're coming from tends to do very, very well in the US and Canada in terms of education, in terms of earning power. And I think in turn, we'll kind of see that reflected more in how we choose to move about, not only back on the continent, but also connecting other parts of the diaspora, the Caribbean, CARICOM, Brazil, even in Europe. So I think that, the diaspora can unify as a regional economic pseudo type of block. And then that will be very interesting as it kind of moves forward in the future.
My next guest has spent his entire career asking one question. What does it look like when Black people and Africans in the diaspora are fully included in travel, in technology, in land ownership, and wealth? Born in Maryland to a Nigerian father and a Liberian mother, he grew up between the United States and West Africa and has been building bridges between those two worlds ever since. He holds a degree in finance from Temple University and a master's from Schema Business School in France. He went on to work for technology companies such as World Bank Group, USAID, and Fannie Mae. In 2015, he co-founded Noirbnb, a platform built to give Black travelers safe, welcoming space to explore the world. At a time when nobody in Silicon Valley was talking about racial discrimination and sharing economy, Norby was featured in the New York Times Essence and Black Enterprise and became a rallying point for the 1.1 trillion Black travel market. Today, he's the founder of BLIA, Buy Land in Africa, a platform making it simple and safe for the global African diaspora to invest in Africa real estate. Because he believes in those owning land back home is one of the most important wealth building moves in Africa and abroad today. Please welcome to the show, Jide Ehimika to Africa Capital Connect. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hi, Kwame. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited and looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. Jide, father's from Nigeria, your mother's from Liberia. Give me your history. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? And what got you into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I am a Marylander, I guess. I'm from the DC area. I was actually born in Silver Spring, Maryland, which, if anyone knows, is like right outside of DC. And I lived here for the first, 7, 8 years of my life. At that point, my dad got a job in Nigeria, back in Nigeria where he's from, and he moved the entire family. And I'm the oldest of three kids, so obviously I was the oldest. The entire family got moved back, and we stayed there for almost 5 years before I came back to the U.S. to do middle school and high school. But I actually did it in Baltimore because I actually lived with my grandparents when I did high school. So funny enough, like I basically consider myself from Maryland. Like, I was born here, grew up there, but I went to high school in Baltimore. So I have a lot of friends in Baltimore. I kind of identify as more of like a Baltimore person. So that's just, that background. But as you know, I'm sure you can grow up in Mars, and if you grow up in a West African household, you are from West Africa. You understand what I'm saying? So that's I have that background for sure, and very, very typical, I guess. So we ate African food every day. All the things that as kids, people watching this from the diaspora know as kids you have to do kind of growing up. I had to do that as well. What did make it a little bit interesting was that my mom's from Liberia, so my mom's not Nigerian. So I actually have like a strong Liberian influence as well from that side of the family, as well as a strong like Nigerian influence from that side of the family. So I always have a West African upbringing, but they're more similar than they are different, to be honest with you, those cultures. But yeah, so that's a little bit about my childhood.
Awesome. So what got you into the entrepreneurship journey, would you say, Jide?
So a lot of things. Actually, from my family's an entrepreneurial family. So even when I was in Nigeria, and the other thing I should say is that because my parents kept living in Nigeria after moving back all those years ago, I always went back to Nigeria. I was in Nigeria every single year. So since I've been like 7 years old, I've been in Nigeria and sometime Liberia as well. I've been in Africa basically every year since then. So I truly do have like that kind of dual lens. But my grandmother on both sides were entrepreneurs. My grandma in Nigeria, she ran like, she had a store, she had a bakery. My grandma in Liberia had like, a consulting business essentially is what it is, like import export type stuff. So like, I always had a entrepreneurial bent as a family. Like tons of people in our family have businesses, and like Nigerians, a lot of Nigerians, I guess, are also entrepreneurial because of that, right? Like you have to set your thing up to make money. So I've always viewed life in that way. I've always viewed life like, okay, um, it's best for you to create your own thing and kind of build the world that you kind of want to see. And because of the generation I'm in, a lot of that now has become digital, right? You can build a startup, you can build a platform, you can build a product or whatever that is, put that out in the market, and you can scale it to, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, even people to use your product and kind of see it that way. So that is kind of how I kind of always saw it. And, like most true entrepreneurs are told, you want to do the thing that you're most passionate about, the thing that, just calls to you most directly. And for me, because I always grew up in that lens of kind of like a global sense of knowing myself, where I am, my history, my people, where I come from, and also kind of seeing life from a global perspective. One thing that's always been apparent to me is this connection of blackness, so to speak, this connection of black communities around the globe. We're more similar than we are different. So even though growing up, for example, in middle school and high school, people are like, oh, you're African, and these are like the differences that are very pronounced. Um, I always, which is true, you always kind of connect with people as well that I was like, oh, but these are really the similarities. It's kind of crazy that foods are similar, music is similar, culture is similar, the traditions, the way you just do, the way you move about, the way you even laugh. Like I always tell people it's funny that you can see a group of uncles somewhere laughing, and the way they laugh and they move, you don't know if they're from Africa, if they're from the South, like Louisiana, Alabama, if they're from Brazil, like if they're from the UK, you have no idea because we all are very, very similar in that way in our mannerisms. So just kind of having that in my background and having that like in my head, that really like led me to always, and anything I've done, it's like if I'm creating something, I kind of create from that lens and that prism.
Got it. Got it. The reason why I even asked about the what started your entrepreneurship journey is because having African parents myself, and maybe I might be a little bit older than you. It was always go to school, get a good job. It was never like go out there and play sports, go out there and start a business. Because I feel like if I started something when I was younger, maybe it would have been a little bit more successful at that point, or maybe right now is the right time. But I'm just thinking from your perspective or your lens, were your parents okay with you starting a business or being entrepreneur mindset, or is it that the times have changed, right? And parents are now a little bit more open to the idea of kids starting a business rather than just going to school becoming a doctor, as most African parents would dream of.
No, my parents are not okay with me not being they wanted me to start a business because again, like I said, there's that, oh, go make, make money. Oh, okay, yeah, you sell these things on the side, but they still want you to have a job. In fact, to this day, my mom still refers to my companies as a job. She's like, oh, how's your job? And I'm like, well, mom, it's a little bit different. Like, it's not like, I clock in every day and go to the thing and, I don't have a boss, but my bosses are like my investors and that kind of and customers and clients. But to her, it's still just a job, right? So, it's yeah, that hasn't changed. That's why I got my degree in finance. That hasn't changed at all. That's exactly what the expectation is. Like, so it's funny that you say that, but yeah, that's they want you to do both, right? So it's very interesting.
You grew up in Maryland or born in Maryland, and your dad's from Nigeria, your mom's from
Yeah.
Liberia. You went to school in Boston. You did your
Baltimore.
master's in Baltimore. Excuse me,
Yeah.
Baltimore. You did your master's in France. So when someone asks you where are you from, what's the one answer you give them?
So, and this is interesting because I guess it depends who asks. But most people ask me, nowadays I find myself saying Nigeria like a lot, right? And that's just like in my adulthood. When I was in college, I said I was from Baltimore because, I guess most people in school they just, want to know like kind of where you're from, there. So, I still see myself really as a Maryland guy. Like, that's Maryland is it's so funny because I tell people I was just telling someone the other day, like Maryland is always home to me, right? Like I can drive around the streets of the 95, like I can get from, all the different Howard County, Baltimore City, PG County up into DC like with my eyes closed. Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't need like it's home to me. However, I feel most like myself and I feel my best when I'm in West Africa. specifically. And when I'm on the continent in general, like I feel great. Like, the air agrees with me, agrees with my skin. When I eat the food, my stomach don't hurt. Like I just when I'm in on the continent, I'm like, oh wow, this is me. I feel like myself. Yet home always has felt like, this little corner of the mid Atlantic for some reason. So it's an interesting question you ask.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'm surprised you said the food goes well. For me, I can't do spice, so I'm like struggling when I go back home. So love the food though. Love the food, but the spice is just like, oh my God, but I love it. All right. Can you talk about how you started with Noirbnb and how that transitioned into what you're doing now with BLIA?
Yeah, so actually the Noirbnb thing is actually kind of funny. So, um, like I said, I traveled a lot my entire life basically. And like most travelers around that time, the early 2010s, Airbnb had really just kind of hit the scene, and that was kind of like a game changer. Before then, I think a lot of people were doing like couch surfing, which was like really popular before then, and that kind of thing. And this is like OG, like, a traveler type ways. People who hear this, we go, oh wow, like yeah, like that's really in the trenches, like traveler type ways. But you have to remember, I lived in Europe for almost 2 years, doing grad school, so I had to do a lot of like couch surfing and backpacking and going from Madrid to this city to that city, just kind of seeing Europe and just kind of like trying to understand again the world around me and like kind of my place in it. So I was familiar with Airbnb and I used Airbnb, and I'd also kind of seen a lot of the problems with using Airbnb, not even necessarily in Europe, but especially when you came back to the States. So I was told people it was interesting because when you did short term rentals in Europe, also because I guess I'm American, I have an American accent, an American passport. Um, you're treated there like people won't necessarily at that time, they won't just like cancel if you book the stay, right? Or they won't be like, oh, are you coming here to throw a party? Like it wasn't, you didn't really feel that. So when my first exposure to Airbnb was actually outside of the US, it was actually again in Europe, and I was just like, oh man, this is great, this is like fantastic, like oh my god, like this solved all the problems, this is a home run type, like company. Then when I came back to the US after I graduated with my master's and then started using Airbnb in the States, it was like a whole different ball game, right? Because now these are the problems that I'm having. People are canceling on me last minute. People don't want to book the rental to me because they're like, oh well, are you sure you're not gonna have a party? We want you to pay this like extra deposit, and like, or one time I remember I rented an Airbnb up in New York, and the owner just popped in on me, like literally just opened the door, popped in on me like one morning, like, I'm like, oh, like, I was like, even in a hotel though, not before they open the door, right? They won't just like, walk in on you. So it was yeah, so but realizing that, it was like, man, someone should do something about this. And I had a friend that I'd known, in DC, and he actually connected me with my co-founder at the time, who had a bad experience with an Airbnb, whereas like some police, like in Atlanta, some police like jumped in his Airbnb, drew guns on them, did all sorts of crazy stuff. He posted that, it went viral, and that's when my friend, who was also friends with him, a mutual friend of ours, connected us. And they said, Jide's a tech guy. I know this is something that you've been thinking about, you wanted to do. Maybe you guys can get together and kind of do it. So I spoke to my co-founder. He told me, hey, these are the problems. He was coming from more like a creative background. He wasn't necessarily a tech guy. He was kind of like, oh, it would be great if we did our own like Airbnb, but for like black people to kind of stop. And I was just like, yes, that's a great idea. So we kind of just got to building, and that was how that started.
That's interesting, man. It seemed like you built Noirbnb at a time when Silicon Valley wasn't really talking about black travel, which is about you know trillions of dollars, right? How is it possible that something that large was invincible and not being talked about? And how did that make you feel as being one of the people who actually started it?
Well, Kwame, I want to say this. It still happens today. And, I understand now because I'm older, I'm a little bit more mature, I have a lot more experience in business. So I kind of understand it now because as large as our market is, just as a standalone, if you actually do it in comparison, our market isn't that large. And this just doesn't go for just travelers, this goes for everything. So, for example, in the media space, you don't see a lot of black movies get made unless they know they're going to have like, Michael B. Jordan and Will Smith do, unless they have like a background of success behind it, then they don't really take
Right.
a lot of chances with quote unquote black movies. And the reason for that is because we have less room for less margin for error. So a movie might do good, it was like, oh, a lot of black people saw it and when it did good, but because our overall population, just in volume and in buying power, maybe less than the kind of the majority population, those
Mhm.
investors and backers and people with capital don't want to take those kind of chances. And the same kind of applies to tech, right? So when we look at the market, again, it's over $1 trillion for black travel, but they look at it and they're like, but it's niche. They'll use that word niche. It's niche. It's a little bit scattered. They're not exactly sure how to like kind of thread that needle. So it's like it's risky. And that's how they'll determine it. It's a risky market, right? So they're looking at something like Expedia, which will capture a larger market and will still capture the black travel market as compared to say, hey, I'm making something for black travel specifically. Because then it's like, it's really lower percentage of the population, lower percentage of the market with a lower like buying percentage. But me and you as black people sitting here, like that's kind of ridiculous because we've seen the black dollar and we understand how black capital is very significant and is a power mover and all these different things in the market. So at the end of the day, you kind of realize it's up to us and people who believe in that vision to kind of make these things happen.
Got it. Got it. So where's Noirbnb right now? Where does it stand? Is it something you still own, or have you?
No, no. So I exited the company in 2019. My co-founder and I, it was acquired by Travel and Leisure magazine, which is in the travel space. It's like a magazine travel space. And I exited then, which was right before COVID, which actually was kind of a good thing looking back because, COVID happened and that really hit the travel space, really, really hard altogether. So that was great for me because at a really young age, I got a chance to have the experience. Before that, I didn't really have any startup experience. I didn't have an experience like trying to create a business that large or anything like that. So that was actually really, really good for me because it really kind of exposed me. It set up the base of my network. It also really exposed me to this larger idea around black travel and really kind of sharpened my focus on what it is that I want to do and what it is that I think is important.
Oh, that's excellent because now you went from building a travel platform to building a land investment platform in Africa, right? I know you probably learned a lot from Noirbnb and some of your experiences. Can you walk me through the evolution of how you went from this, travel platform to now this, investment platform?
Yeah. So again, I think age kind of has something to do with it. You just kind of have a little bit more experience. Um, I'm so when people think travel, right? They think travel agents, travel things like travel guy, and that was kind of where like I kind of saw the things I was building where that was going because again, I've been traveling for a long time. I kind of enjoy travel, and it was really important to me that the dignity of communities I cared about were reflected in travel and when we're traveling. So, for example, anyone that has taken a trip to the continent and does a layover. So, say you use Lufthansa and you want to travel from the U.S. to Africa, you have to stop over in Germany, or use Air France, you have to stop over in France, or use British Airways, you have to stop over in Heathrow in London, right? Everyone notices that that first plane that comes from the US to whatever their central city is or their hub city in Europe is like their crown jewel type plane, right? It's a big plane, it's new, all the media on it is new, the food is amazing, the seats are like, it's very nice. When you hop on the plane in the airport itself, you notice that like your gate is really comfortable. You land in a really comfortable gate. All that is easy and fantastic. You're like, oh, this is nice. However, then that next leg, when you're traveling from Germany to Nigeria, or when you're traveling from France to Ghana, or when you're traveling from the UK now and you're going into Cameroon or whatever it is, right? That next plane is not so nice, right? And you really kind of look at it, and it's an example of how we get the worst of everything. And what I'm saying about this is, and this was where age kind of taught me this, it's not just travel that this is true. When you are on the continent, and I know there was an expose about people getting baby food, for example, right? And you look at the ingredients of the baby food that you'll buy on the continent versus the ingredients of the baby food that you buy in Europe or in the US. It's like, wow, like these ingredients are way worse. A lot more sugar, a lot more filler, like, that kind of thing, right? Like, lower quality ingredients. A lot of times they're closer to expiration. Same thing with like cars and things that you import or in general, you just realize that as consumers, black communities and black people get the absolute bottom, the worst of everything, right? And it's like, okay, how then can we switch that from being true? And how then can we now at least have dignity? And because if you're a consumer, you're still spending money and you want to have, get a return back on the value and the dignity back on the value that you have. So I was looking at it like, okay, I want to prioritize the black consumer because I am one. And I want people to take my dollar seriously. And I want people to take my investment seriously. And I want people to treat me with a level of seriousness. So how can I do that? And that is kind of what the impetus was for me now to step into building something that kind of looked at investors and said, "Hey, we value your investment. You are our top priority." We all these different things of how people value how like JP Morgan values its top clients. I want to be valued that way as well. So that was kind of the impetus that kind of set me to do that. Now, why did I do it with real estate? That's a different story altogether, and we can get into that.
Absolutely. So walk me through the process then. BLIA is it like a beginning to end process from start to finish as far as catering from the travel to the finding a property in Africa? Like, how are you solving those problems that you mentioned as far as the airlines and some of those situations that we see as Black consumers?
We help diaspora investors safely invest in property on the continent without the fear of fraudulent transactions, losing their money, transactions slipping through the cracks, or exorbitant fees and trying to do what you have to do. Now, this came on the back of me later on around 2022 trying to buy property and, of course, just increase my investment portfolio on the continent. I bought property in Nigeria. I bought property in Liberia. I was looking at property in Ghana. And this was like me in the process of doing this. And you hear all the horror stories from elders in your family, from people peer groups who've like done things and bought property. And really, it was me asking a question, okay, why does this work the way it works? And in fact, I can tell you this story. So I bought property in 2021 in DC. My wife and I, we bought our house in DC. And when we went to buy the house, there were two times that we actually got off of our couch to do this process from discovery through closing. Number one was when a real estate agent reached out to us and said, "Hey, there's a property I think you guys would really like. You'd really like to see it. Before you put an offer, you should come and see it." We said, "Oh yeah, before we put an offer, we should go and see it." That was the first time, right? And that was like a 20-minute trip. We're out there, we walked around. Oh, it looks nice. Da da. We can see ourselves here. Okay, sure. And we put in an offer. The second time was when we got off the couch to go actually sign the documents at closing, right? And we now own the property. Every other thing we did from the comfort of our home, from our couch, right? Applying for the mortgage, um, making the offer, the escrow procedures, all sorts of documents that we had to read through and sign and send back. Shifting through the various agents because it wasn't just one real estate agent we had. Like, there's of course, a listing agent, and we had like our agent, like, all these processes was done from the comfort of our home. And the average property in DC is $500,000 plus, right? So we're doing a transaction that's worth almost $1 million, and we only had to leave our house twice to do this, and knew we were legally covered, knew that everything was going good with us, right? Now, fast forward 2 years later, I'm in Nigeria. I want to buy a piece of land that's like $10,000, right? So I mean, this is really just a fraction of of the cost of the property that I bought in the US. However, it required me to be there basically almost every single day for months at a time. I had to meet through multiple people in person. I had to be on the ground. I had to like all these things that you had to do just to complete a $10,000 deal. And even so, that deal ended up being almost double before I was able to close on that land. And that just doesn't make sense, right? I mean, from every perspective, that just doesn't make sense. And it led me to ask that question: why is it that I can complete a deal that's worth almost $1 million from my couch in the US, yet a deal that's literally pennies, a fraction of that amount, $10,000. It's months and months of stress that I have to physically be there for. Otherwise, I'm at risk of losing my entire deposit and losing my money. Like that doesn't. Why are those two things simultaneously true? And that's when I kind of got to work. Right. I dug deep. I was on the ground for almost a year at that point. My co-founder and I. She also came from the travel space, but we were in various markets in Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, South Africa. And we were meeting with stakeholders, right? Like, big time, like, developers, real estate agents, government officials. And we're just asking that one question: why? Why does this work this way? Why does this work this way? Why does this work this way? Because also, coming from a travel background, there were lots of people that I'd worked with that had traveled to Africa maybe for the first time, or maybe like they were second generation and they hadn't been, their parents just told them about it or whatever the case may be. And they were looking at it like, oh my God, this is beautiful. I want to buy property here, but they didn't know where to start. So now in my head, I'm like, okay, I know there's a huge market for this. However, there's a huge barrier that's stopping that market from, executing on what they want to do. So how then do I marry the two? And that's kind of how BLIA started. That kind of got the ball rolling.
Interesting. So, how are you ensuring these guarantees of making sure it's secure, there's no corruption? Are you finding these artisans that you've worked with that you trust? How are you finding these folks to guarantee that if they buy through BLIA,
Mhm.
it's safe for them, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the very first thing is that we found out that incentives, as everyone knows, kind of drive everything, right? And real estate in Africa is incentivized to be opaque and behind a black box. That is by design. The reason for that is long, of course, but the output of that is a lack of trust. So what we found is it's not a money issue, it's a trust issue. Buyers can't trust that if they pay a deposit, that deposit isn't going to disappear. So that kind of slows up how often they deposit, how much they deposit, and that makes it a really, really high barrier before they even pay a deposit, which slows everything down, right? Sellers can't trust that if they put an agent on their task of selling their property, that they're going to see all the money back from that sale. So that means now that they're incentivized to, they don't let as many agents know about a property being available. They want to be hands-on and involved as much as possible. And then also they now try to negotiate things, under the table, outside of the agents or whatever. Agents can't trust that they're going to be properly compensated for the work they do to facilitate these deals. So therefore, that starts bad behavior. They're now looking to get upfront payments from buyers and from sellers before they do anything, because they don't want to be cut out. So because you have all these like barriers of trust, that puts a huge bottleneck on the market and the industry as a whole, and that lies the difference between the American real estate market and the sub-Saharan African real estate market. So what we want to do at BLIA is, okay, let's light a flashlight and let's at least open up these barriers of trust. So people at the very least can be transparent in their transactions and know, I know what I'm dealing with, I know what I'm dealing with, I know what I'm dealing with. If you want to talk about being in court afterwards, or like kind of like unpeeling the onion, a lot of people have issues with like a chain of title, chain of ownership, who owns the deed. This deed was given down to me by my father, but it's five of us, so can I sell the whole property, or can I only sell 1/5 of the property? Can I sell any of it at all? It's like there's all these questions that like legally, like, courts have to like kind of figure out, and that's going to remain to be true. But before you buy a property, you should at least know that this deed is split five ways, and the father, and this is just one of the five children. So you know what you're getting into as a buyer before you even say, hey, I'm going to buy this property, right? And that's what BLIA does. We provide transparency to facilitate these deals. So before a buyer even bids on a property, we verify that, okay, the ownership is who the ownership says they're going to be, that this property in fact does exist. Let's start there. That this is a real place, that this place is authorized to be sold by this person, or maybe it's authorized to be sold by this person and other people kind of connected to the deal. So we do our due diligence to verify as much as we can, and then we bring that transparency to both sides of the deal so they know what they're getting into before they even start the deal. And then on top of that, we now have a chain, so we keep records of all the messages, transactions, documents that are uploaded. We have our own escrow service, so when you do pay the money into deposit, it's not just going to somebody and you're praying that they don't run off with the money. You're just paying it into the platform. The platform holds it transparently so both parties can see that the escrow is there, and before the money is dispersed, We make sure that the milestones are hit, the agreements are hit. We make sure that lawyers are involved to sign off on each side of the deal as need be before, so basically we're just a respected, transparent mediator between these deals that are already happening already, to be quite frankly, all over the continent.
Got it. So you guys are not actually helping them find the land and purchase the land. You guys are just a mediator to make sure that all the little nuances that they need to understand and know is being coordinated by somebody who they could trust that is accurate as stated.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, so because of that, actually, we do help them find a land, right? So we help from discovery all the way, we help surface. So for example, if you go to our platform and you put in a property request, which is how one of the big game changers, how the platform works. As a buyer, you say, hey, I am looking for a property in Accra. I would like it to be within 20 minutes or 25 minutes of the airport. And I would like it to have, a gated security or something like that, right? And here's my budget, right? We now, with our algorithmic system, we have AI now that, can match you with the top real estate developers who can fit those criteria in Accra. So now you can make an informed decision. Okay, I want to work with this person or this person or this person. And now when you reach out to these people, or when, I guess, because we connect you now, when you're connected to these people, now it surfaces maybe properties that weren't publicly available before. Because remember, most properties are not publicly available because of this trust issue, right? If I am a real estate developer and I have a top, property that I know is going to, fetch top dollar, I'm not going to publicly put that on a platform or a website somewhere. And because it's a trust issue, if I put that on a platform or a website and say, hey, this property is worth $100,000, right? Now, that hurts me because maybe I could have sold it for $200,000. Maybe I could have, maybe somebody else comes in, especially if I don't own the property, and swoops in my business and they sell it for $75,000, and then the seller and that person kind of split the proceeds and cut me out of the business. So because of that, the majority of the top properties never ever go online. There's no such thing as Zillow in sub-Saharan Africa for that very reason, right? Because they don't even want the top properties to go online. So we work around that. We say, okay, look, we'll put you in contact with a verified top player on the ground in Accra. Here's a list of 3 or 4 of them that we verified. These are top players. They do deals all the time. And now in communications with these deals, with these people, certain deals will surface, right? Because now the guy talking to you is like, oh, you're a serious buyer, Kwame. Here, let me show you this great development I have in cantonments that you would love. Or let me show you this great flat that I have in Osu that you would love, newly renovated, that that you would love. So that's kind of the value of our platform and what we're bringing. So yes, we do actually help people find deals, because when you get connected with a top player in any ecosystem, now that would surface top deals that will call to you or that you're looking for.
Are you guys vetting these folks coming in to use your platform to make sure that they are ready to buy? What kind of vetting system do you guys have?
Yeah, so we do ID verification first, so that we can, you are who you say you are, and we put you up against all sorts of lists. Because the other thing that you have to be careful about, especially again, trust issue, a lot of sellers were telling us that sometimes they get in trouble if they sell to, and this is more, I think, a problem in some countries than others, but you have, people who've committed fraud, or maybe politicians who've run off with like stolen money, and they want to park that money in real estate in a country, right? So if I've, embezzled $1 million, I'm like, oh, you know what? The best way to wash that money is to buy $1 million home in, Lagos, or to buy $1 million home in Nairobi, because now that's just clean money, that I've bought. So we vet against that, right? So we do ID verification. We run that ID and name against, all sorts of blacklists. Are you a politician? Are you on gray list or blacklist around the world? Our money lists, are people looking for you, that kind of thing, or whatever. And then another thing we do is we also vet your ability to buy. So that's your bank statements, that's your work history, or work stubs, investment statements. We do kind of gather that to a certain extent before we introduce you to kind of these top real estate professionals on the ground.
Interesting. And how are you noticing the difference between, say, a Nigeria versus a Ghana versus Kenya? Like, are there different nuances in how business is done, or is it very similar as far as BLIA is working in those different countries? Because I know people like to look at Africa as one country, but it's a whole continent, right? So things might be done differently, languages, all these different nuances. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Absolutely. It's so complex, honestly, Kwame. It's so complex because to your point, it's 54 different countries, so it's 54 different markets, 54 different rules and regulations, 54 different ways of doing things, right? It's 54 really, really different things. Yet at the same time, when it comes to our problems and the issues that you run into, Africa is a country. Actually, it's amazing when you actually think of it that way, right? Like the same problems you have in Ghana or in Nigeria, the same problems you see on the other side of the continent in Kenya or Tanzania or even in South Africa a lot of times. So um, navigating that is one of our biggest difficulties, to be quite frank and quite honest with you, right? But another truth of Africa is you can't do business on the continent if you aren't on the ground. That's something I learned really, really early. I think we talked about my entrepreneurial background. That's something like my grandparents hammered into me as a child, right? Like, don't be one of those Americans that think you're going to be in America and do business in Africa without ever coming to Africa, because you're going to get robbed blind. And that's true to today, right? I always crack jokes. I was like, you go to basically every African country and there's KFC, there's Burger King, there's Pizza Hut, and all these different type of things. I was like, even Pizza Hut has a guy on the ground that makes sure that Pizza Hut isn't getting robbed blind as they're doing business in Africa. And it's just the truth of the matter. And BLIA is no different. So, on the ground, we have in-network partners who are lawyers, surveyors, those type of people who actually know the business of the market that they're in. Like I said, we have our partners who to match you with the top agents on the ground, because that's one of the things that we've kind of found works really well. Um, if you want to be a real estate agent in most countries in Africa, you can be anything and be a real estate. You can be an Uber driver, a dentist, a lawyer. Most people moonlight, they're entrepreneurial in that way, right? Like, I'm a doctor, but I'm also a real estate agent. If you're looking for real estate, I can tell you where to go, that kind of thing, right? And because of that, it makes tracking people and regulations really, really difficult. So we said, hey, if I'm coming from the diaspora, I'm coming from the States, or I'm coming from London, and I want to buy property on in the continent, really what I'm looking for are the top people in that market who do a lot of business, because that's where I'll feel most confident, right? And most comfortable. And a lot of times the issue is I don't even know how to even find the top people in that market, because everyone can look good on social media, everyone can, look good on a website somewhere. But how do I know that, this guy actually does the business he says he does, or this guy actually, is used to working with diasporans like he says he is? And that's a huge hurdle that we kind of help jump from the very beginning, right? So because we can say, hey, let's match these diasporans with the top people on the ground, you'll be surprised at how much that actually cuts off a lot of the issues that people deal with. Now, there's another side of that, because people say, oh, but I have a cousin's friend's auntie who bought in Ghana and they paid $50,000 for a two-bedroom. So how come this one is, $100,000? No, I think I can find it cheaper because they'll put me in touch with this guy who's a barber and he knows somebody that, and he can get it, like, thing. And it's like, and it might work. And it might work. Africa is a surprising. I've seen things in the last few years that surprised me. It might work. Like, that guy really might know a rich politician somewhere who has some properties to set up, and it might work. But oftentimes it doesn't, and that's where people kind of get into trouble. So again, what we try to do is bring transparency to the process, and by bringing transparency, because we do it more often, we have a lot of data, and we can say, hey, data shows that this might be a little bit too good to be true. Data shows that this might not be the area you might want to invest in, especially as an outsider. You're not really kind of used to the country. That's not might not be where you want to go. So we can bring some sense of normalcy and order to that chaos.
Awesome. So do you guys have a certain threshold you deal with? Say you don't work with any property less than 100,000, or is it like from as low as possible to as high as possible? What's it?
Yeah, no, there's no threshold. And the other thing is, because also we deal with land. Land tends to be cheaper than finished properties. So there's no threshold, because I mean, really, you can buy an acre of land for like $1,000 depending on where you are, right? And sometimes that's all people really want, right? There's like, hey, I want to own an acre on in the motherland that I can put in my son's name, and that's my birthday gift to him, basically, right? And it's like, sure, we can facilitate that deal. Why not, right? And again, people don't even know where to start with that, and that's all things that our platform can help with. So no, there's no like minimum really, but again, because we do this a lot, we can now offer transparency and let you know when something might be a little bit too good to be true.
Is BLIA open in how many countries right now in Africa that you're doing business in?
So six, working behind the scenes really hard to kind of expand that. But like I just told you, we want to make sure that we have a presence in the markets before we say, hey, this market is open and you can come on the platform and buy in that market. So right now it is Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Liberia. Funny enough, we actually have a few things there, and we've just now closed in on some partners in Rwanda. So that's going to be our sixth in newest market.
Okay. And how's the structure? Are you partnering with individuals in that location to become partners, or they just hired as contractors that you're working with?
So it's really like a partnership because again, the beautiful thing about our platform is we're bringing the diaspora demand. And when you're in these markets, when you're on the ground, that's the number one thing that people are looking for, right? Because at the same time, remember what I said, it's a ball of trust that on the other side is distrustful, right? So real estate agents on that side, there's very few people that are like full-time real estate agents in most of these sub-Saharan African markets. And that's even in Lagos, like that's wealthy and people can sell 3, 4 properties a month. There's very few guys that's like, oh, this is the only thing I do, right? They do that and other things. And the reason for that is because it's not a smooth or stable type of like, opportunity or job or career. Some months are better than others. And there's a lot of nonsense, right? So they meet people that they think are potential buyers, but they're wasting time. They don't have the funds that they say they're gonna have. Oh, actually, it's not me that's buying. I'm working on behalf of my chief from the village. So I'm just taking a cut off the top. Like there's all sorts of things that kind of happen. So you know when we come to them and say, hey, we have buyers from the diaspora that are bringing dollars, euros, and pounds, and they're interested in buying on the continent, their eyes light up, right? Like almost like the cartoon light up with the dollar signs in the eyes. Their eyes light up. They're like, okay, how can I get in contact with your group? How can I get in contact with your clientele? That's who I want to meet because those are people that are not going to waste my time. I don't have to worry about the currency, devaluating. Like it's going to be like legitimate, like that's what I want to meet. So that's our superpower because we come in and say, hey, we're bringing this demand, so we only want to work with top agents in this market. So now that allows us to, it's all who a lot of the economy is informal, so we meet a top agent and they connect us with a top lawyer. A top lawyer connects us with a top surveyor. A surveyor connects us with another top developer who connects us with another top lawyer. You know what I'm saying? So that now allows us to get our network effects really in order before we enter a market.
No, that's very interesting. Respecting your time, Jide, I want to ask you a few questions before we wrap up. But before that, I just want to say, what motivates you? You seem extremely motivated. You're driven. You've been doing a lot in your career so far. What motivates you?
Well, as I'm getting older, my family, obviously, but like I said at the beginning, I'm just tired of getting the worst of everything. And that has been true for me from as a kid till now. You look around and it just feels like our communities are the ones that are constantly disrespected. Our communities are the ones that are constantly given less than, are told to make do with less than. And it's something that has really been a passion of mine. It's like, okay, how can I then move the baton forward to make sure that that's not as true, right? How can I move the baton forward to make sure that the black dollar is as respected as dollars from other communities, or people see us as someone worthy of dignity, of worthy of respect. So that's something that's always kind of motivated me, and I think that kind of continues to today.
We talk a lot about investing in opportunities. Let me talk about a different kind of investment for a second. Your health is your highest return on investment. That's why I created a brand called Bow Action. We make Vestly Pro adjustable weighted vest, currently on Amazon. The vest adds up to 35 pounds to your body weight, including wrist and ankle weights. If you're serious about investing in your health and not just your portfolio, and you want to support this channel and what we're building, please check out the link in the description below. Every purchase goes directly into keeping these conversations going. Thank you very much for your support. That's awesome. All right, let me get into my rapid fire questions. What is your biggest win so far?
My biggest win, I would say the biggest win for BLIA is the fact that we're actually even able to enter into these markets because real estate is seen as a tar pit, right? It's the golden goose, or really is Ahab's whale, to be more honest with you, as far as African entrepreneur goes. Everyone you meet in some way, shape, or form is in real estate. Again, from the politicians to the highest level businessmen to taxi driver, Uber drivers to boys on the street. Everyone you meet is like, I'm in real estate. So it really is like this like north star that drives African like economic mobility and economic action. And the fact that we're even able to get a platform up running in these markets, and we can even carve out our little niche, our little like a small piece, to me is a win, and I'm very excited to see where we go from here.
Biggest mistake.
So personally, I would say the biggest mistake that I made was starting businesses without fully understanding, jumping in without fully understanding how I was going to be successful and how that business was going to grow, right? Thinking that a good idea was enough, thinking that hard work was enough. It's never enough. You can have the best idea in the world, your financials can make all the sense on paper, but and that just doesn't just go for the continent. Even here in the States, like businesses fail all the time, right? Because you can have the best ideas on paper, and when you actually get into it, it's not enough. So I think you know you need that extra bit of understanding, experience, know-how, and luck to be successful. So that's my biggest mistakes: jumping into a lot of things without having that.
If you had 10,000 to invest in Africa right now, what would it be?
If I had $10,000 to invest in Africa right now, I would partner with other people with $10,000, and I will invest in real estate, in property development. That's basically what I would do. Now, the countries, I can be tossed into a few different countries because every day I see new opportunities. And I'm like, oh man, this is kind of fantastic. But yeah, I think that the future is in Africa, and I think that a lot of our property is undervalued, especially for where it's going to be in the next decade. And even if you want to use the property for things that are more commercial, you don't just not just a house or a development for people to live in, but you know, offices or commercial buildings or that kind of thing. I think all of that is undervalued. So that's where I'll go with it.
Awesome. One thing that needs to change for Africa to reach its potential.
How much time do you have, right? Oh my goodness. Okay, I can actually no, you know what? I actually do have a good answer for this. I think that we need to be unified, and not in the kumbaya way when people think unification, but I think even in a just a strategic unification can go a long way. Uh, so coming from the travel space, the fact that everyone knows it actually is cheaper to fly instead of flying from Nigeria straight to Senegal, Dakar, it's cheaper to fly to Nigeria to France and then come back to Senegal. Like all that is stupid. Like I spent um a lot of December and January this last year on the continent, and I went from Ghana to Liberia to Benin Republic to Nigeria. And just those four countries in the course of a month, I don't even want to tell you how much it cost me traveling between those four countries. And that makes no sense. It makes no sense at all, right? And that's low hanging fruit that you can say, make it easy. Another thing is, unified in terms of like visas. If I get a visa, for example, to Senegal, that visa should cover me through all ECOWAS countries, but it doesn't. You understand? And that I'm lucky I have an ECOWAS passport, so I can travel to these countries without that. But for example, my co-founder doesn't, right? And it's like, if we have a business meeting and she needs to meet somebody, now it's like, oh my God, who can I call? Who do I know? And, again, low-hanging fruit that just should make it easier for people to move around, do business with each other, leverage off of each other. And I think just that would take us further than where we've been so far.
Excellent. I think that brings me to my next question is, can Africa ever unite as one country?
As one country, no chance. But as a formidable regional block, yes, I do think that can happen. Now, would that happen in our lifetime? Maybe not. Maybe that's a next lifetime type of thing. But like I always tell people, if I told you 100 years ago, um, coming out of World War I, that 100 years later, two of the greatest superpowers in the world would be Israel out of the Middle East and China, you would have looked at me like I had three heads. Like Israel didn't even exist. Like, what are you even talking about? So not only would that country exist, but it will also be a global superpower. No, you're crazy. And China was in the midst of coming out of their opium wars, right? It was like that. You're not making any sense. But I say this to say that the world can change really, really quickly in a century, and it would not shock me if a century from now, Africa is seen as a geopolitical power, a centralized power. I think the way we get there is starting with regional blocks. So there's ECOWAS, there's EAS in East Africa. Of course, North Africa they have their Arab states, and even Southern Africa. Can unite a bit. But I think you start with regional blocks and then, you move forward that way and you increase your economic power, you increase your globalized power. And then the other thing I want to talk about, and I'll be remiss if I don't mention it, the diaspora really is the sixth region of Africa. And I think that diaspora power is getting stronger and stronger every generation because, we're educated and a lot of times the immigrant stock that we're coming from tends to do very, very well in the US and Canada in terms of education, in terms of earning power. And I think in turn, we'll kind of see that reflected more in how we choose to move about, not only back on the continent, but also connecting other parts of the diaspora, the Caribbean, CARICOM, Brazil, even in Europe. So I think that, the diaspora can unify as a regional economic pseudo type of block. And then that will be very interesting as it kind of moves forward in the future. So yeah, I think the future is wide open. No one knows what's written yet. So Africa can unify in our lifetime. But as one country, no, I don't think that's possible.
Makes sense. Makes sense. All right. My last question, right, is what I call the bridge, where usually I ask the guest to leave a specific resource, a specific contact, opportunity for the audience. What would you leave for everyone watching that they could pick up and utilize tomorrow, a specific contact resource or whatever the case may be on the bridge?
Oof. Okay, so this is also a very, 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 very hard question. And there's two thoughts immediately that I have for it. I think for your diaspora audience that wants to get involved in Africa, I would say start local where you are. Um, no matter where you are, I'm sure there's a diaspora community you can join even online. There's like all sorts of like Afro type communities, Afropolitan communities. People meet, people even get together socially. And I would say start there because once you start there, our connections are very, very small, and within 6 degrees of separation, if you are a serious person, you're moving with speed, you will meet other serious people moving with speed, and it'll get you kind of where you need to go. And then for the people that maybe are, I guess, a little bit more advanced, or maybe they're on the continent and they, want to do things there. I would say, again, use the internet to your advantage. Use this digital online space to your advantage. I know how frustrating. I meet tons of people all the time on the continent that are very frustrated because, for example, they're learning about AI or they want to apply certain things that they know and see and learn. Yet they live in an environment where they may not have electricity 24/7, and they're like worrying about their day to day, meeting ends meet, and they're like, how can I even apply my talents, or how can I even apply these things, in the future? And it's definitely tough, but I would say if you utilize your digital community, meet like-minded people, try to get in like-minded spaces, and these are through digital platforms, then I would say that is a good starting point because again, unity, meeting people, informal connections, who that's really how things can kind of bubble up. So all the platforms that people already use, LinkedIn, Discord, um, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, even like, all the different, use those platforms, meet with like-minded people and just start from there. And you'll be surprised where it'll take you.
Oh man, this was excellent, Jide. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for
Kwame,
sharing
thank you.
what you're working on, your background, and everything else, man. I really appreciate us connecting, and hopefully we could get together again and chop it up soon.
Absolutely. Let me know. Hey, I'm in Ghana often, man. Let me know next time you're going. That's one of my favorite. Ghana's the vacation spot for me. It's less stressful than Nigeria. It's all the things. It's on the beach. It's less stressful. Like
Absolutely.
let me know. We'll
We're gonna
do it, man. We'll
connect.
be up in
We're gonna
those too, man.
connect. I appreciate you so much, man. Thank you so much, Jide.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank
All
you.
right, take care.